All right. Now, what we're going to take up in this class is the topic of the irony that Daniel was putting forward on the nature of this conference in Germany, where you have the greatest economic crisis in world history, but what is it that people are gravitating towards? It's a unity on the question of classical art, classical music, the conceptions on the nature of man that come through in those areas. So what we're going to take up today is the question of what are the qualities needed if you're going to lead, or, well, all of us are leaders. That's why we're here. So what are the qualities that you're going to have to lead in a time of crisis and in a time of peace? And where do you develop those qualities? So what Helga Zepp-LaRouche, I went through some of this last week. Fortunately, there's people here who weren't here last week. So in brief, I'm part of a team that's working nationally in directing and leading the classical music program within the United States LaRouche movement. Obviously, as Daniel went through, we have similar groupings in Germany and every other place where there's a LaRouche movement. So I just got back from a week working with the others in my team. I don't need to go through the background on that, just to say that we did a roundtable discussion with Helga, with Mr. LaRouche's wife. And in that roundtable, she put forward that the most crucial quality that we need is what goes in German as Empfindungsvermögen. For those who aren't native German speakers, she said it can't be directly translated, but the closest idea that she thinks fits is the question of compassion. She said that the most crucial quality to a leader is compassion, and she cited Lessing, who says that the most compassionate man is the best man. Now, what do we mean by compassion? I'm not going to put up the chart that was in my elementary school. Compassion is X. You get the sense, oh, compassion is opening the door for someone or feeling for someone. Well, what's the difference between being compassionate towards someone and being liberal in accepting something that might be a fatal flaw? In a liberal culture, you might think, well, if he wants to slit his throat, that's his opinion. What Helga has come back to repeatedly is she says that compassion is taking more and more of the world into your own heart, taking your nation, taking the entire planet, taking Africa, taking the third world in Asia, taking all of this into your heart. And on an initial idea, of course you wouldn't be liberal on these questions because there are scientifically knowable effects of an economic policy, of a political policy. So when you're saying you're going to be the most compassionate, you're not going to be compassionate if you're going lockstep with Obama just because it's popular. So anyway. So we have a lovely PowerPoint presentation, which I will see. And the first thing I want to do is go back through a couple of the quotes that we visited last week on the question of truth or principle in art, in music. Okay. They're a little shorter this time, so it will be less difficult to follow. So the first one, again, it's a lovely PowerPoint presentation. John Keats. People are familiar with Keats. He says, I am certain of nothing but the holiness of the heart's affections and the truth of the imagination. What the imagination seizes as beauty must be truth, whether it existed before or not. The imagination may be compared to Adam's dream. He awoke and found it truth. I am the more zealous in this affair because I have never yet been able to perceive how anything can be known for truth by consecutive reasoning, or in other words, logical deduction. This thing follows by that thing. He says, I've never yet been able to perceive how anything can be known for truth by consecutive reasoning. Interesting. Albert Einstein, from Where is Science Going?, says, and this one's a little longer, so I'll repeat, sentences that I think are significant to grab onto. He says, thus the supreme task of the physicist is the discovery of the most general elementary laws from which the world picture can be deduced logically. So the task of the physicist, discover the logically deductible world picture. But there is no logical way to the discovery of these elemental laws. There is only the way of intuition, which is helped by a feeling for the order lying behind the appearance. And this Einfühlung, intuition, feeling, is developed by experience. Can one therefore say that any system of physics might be equally valid and possible? Theoretically, there is nothing illogical in that idea, but the history of scientific development has shown that of all thinkable theoretical structures, a single one has at each stage of advance proved superior to all the others. He continues. It is obvious to every experienced researcher that the theoretical system of physics is dependent upon and controlled by the world of sense perception, though there is no logical way whereby we can proceed from sensory perception to the principle that underlies the theoretical structure. I'll read that again. It is obvious to every experienced researcher, mind you, Einstein, very experienced researcher, that the theoretical system of physics is dependent upon and controlled by the world of sense perception, though there is no logical way whereby we can proceed from sensory perception to the principles that underlie the theoretical structure. Okay. Moreover, the conceptual synthesis, which is a transcript of the empirical world, may be reduced to a few fundamental laws on which the whole synthesis is logically built. In every important advance, the physicist finds that the fundamental laws are simplified more and more as experimental research advances. He is astonished to notice how sublime order emerges from what appeared to be chaos. And this cannot be traced back to the workings of his own mind, but is due to a quality that is inherent in the world of perception. Leibniz well expressed this quality by calling it a pre-established harmony. One more. Another person you might expect to be an expert in classical music, physicist Max Planck. This is in an interview in The Observer from 1931. He says, "There is certainly a kinship between science and art, but at the same time, the differences are very marked. Science is the result of the desire for knowledge. The beauty of science arises from the fact that there exists a close connection between truth and beauty. This connection is probably due to the very structure of our minds. But the primary aim of the scientific man is not beauty, but knowledge. In this, he differs from the artist, whose primary concern is beauty. But in his search for beauty, the artist can also reveal to us truth and knowledge. Thus, science and art are akin." So, Question. If there's truth in music, how do you know? How do you know it's true? Is there a textbook? I would disagree. I would disagree. There is a history, and you can locate some qualities of intent in that. But I'm going to get at a different idea. All right. I'm going to go with the example that I have here. I know I asked it as a question, but okay, good. Good people are on the ball. All right, so good hypothesis, Marcel. How do you know if a musical idea is truthful? We're going to take an example here, and there's no visual, so you get to pay extra attention. This is from a weekly report, one of the panel discussions with Mr. LaRouche from the end of January. All right. Whoops, pause, pause, pause. Okay. This is a fugue from the Well-Tempered Clavier. I presented this fugue in a class, I don't know, 4 months ago or so. So people might be familiar with it. Come on, computer. All right.
I will just start.
You're just hearing the voice of the person who's about to play it for you. Okay. that's the fugue, and we're going to look at a couple different ways of doing it. Because one thing that I'll put up front is that classical music is not about a period. It's not about the years it was written in. It's not totally about who was the composer. I've seen Bach done in ways that make me fall asleep. And I don't think that that's classical. So, this let's take that at the end in the Q&A. Yeah. So it's not so let's take the examples. Let people make some hypotheses. What I'm putting forward is that you'll see. You'll get it, Okay, so we're going to take two chunks. We're going to start with the first few measures played one way and then a different way. And you can reflect on what the difference is. One way. Oop. A little different. I don't want to talk about it. I want to jump right to the next set, which is from the end of the fugue. Again, you can reflect on the difference. Let yourself listen and reflect on the difference between the two renditions. point out one thing. During that one, people's heads, at least a few people, including myself, but a few people's heads in the room are going. Okay. I want to play the other one of this second chunk one more time. So, there is a difference. And it's not a difference that you got because of something that you read with your senses. It wasn't that the notes were different. They weren't louder or softer. Obviously, it wasn't something you could touch or taste or feel in a tangible way. It was a difference that you recognized in your mind, communicated from the mind of Bach, from the mind of the performer to your mind. This is something that is internal to you. As the audience, as the performer, there's no outside metric. There's no way to explain in a book. You could, in a sense, try to explain the difference in words. But there's no way that I could communicate to you in words the difference that you felt and recognized in your mind. So, one of those ways of doing this was more truthful than the other, even though it's the same piece. And I think we can agree without getting into it that you're going to find more truth in Bach than in Jay-Z, or a lot of the culture that, or you could call it culture, but that there is a more truthful idea of the mind of man presented in this fugue by Bach than by pretty much what everyone listens to today. In a culture that's developing, in a culture that's going someplace, a nation that is developing towards something, the nation is going to be developing to a more truthful sense of beauty and a more truthful sense of the nature of the mind of man. So, next question we're going to address here is a question dealt with by Friedrich Schiller, the question of the nature of beauty. Schiller puts forward two different kinds of beauty. Archetypal beauty, which is what most people think of, attractive lady, beautiful building, something that's very sensually pleasing. And then I don't know if he has a coined name for it, but he's going to a different quality of beauty. So he says in his On Grace and Dignity, I think he wrote it 1725. No, couldn't have been 1725. He wasn't alive then. So it was written around the time of the American Revolution. He says, "When then we speak of beauty, we neither take into consideration the justness of the aims of nature in themselves, nor formally the degree of adaptation to the principles of art which their combination could offer. Our contemplative faculties hold to the manner in which the object appears to them without taking heed to its logical constitution. Thus, although the architectonic beauty in the structure of man be determined by the idea which has presided at this structure and by the ends that nature proposes for it, The aesthetic judgment, okay, that's the term, the aesthetic judgment, making abstraction of these ends, considers this beauty in itself and in the idea which we form of it. Nothing enters which does not immediately and properly belong to the exterior appearance. Are there markers? Okay. So he's talking about the architectonic beauty, which is the beauty that nature gives. And the aesthetic, which is more closely allied with the will of man, or the mind of man. So I'm going to read the last sentence of this excerpt one more time. Thus, although the architectonic beauty in the structure of man be determined by the idea which has presided at this structure, and by the ends that nature proposes for it, the aesthetic judgment, making abstraction of these ends, considers this beauty in itself, and in the idea which we form of it, nothing enters which does not immediately and properly belong to the exterior appearance. I'm going to take another one. Different chunk of grace and dignity. From nature in herself, this result is clearly perceived from what precedes, so he's referring to himself earlier. From nature in herself, we must ask nothing but a fixed beauty, that of the phenomena that she alone has determined according to the law of necessity. But with free will, chance interferes with the work of nature, and the modifications that affect it thus under the empire of free will are no longer, although all behave according to its own laws determined by these laws. From thence it is to the mind to decide to use its will. From thence it is to the mind to decide the use it will make of its instruments. And with regard to that part of beauty which depends on this use, nature has nothing further to command, nor consequently to incur any responsibility. So he's saying when with free will you depart from the restrictions of the laws of nature and the beauty that's there just when you wake up in the morning, you go outside and it's a lovely daybreak. When through free will you break from that beauty and start getting into the aesthetic beauty, he says, from thence it is to the mind to decide the use it will make of its instruments. And with regard to that part of beauty which depends on this use, nature has nothing further to command, nor consequently to incur any responsibility. You've departed from mere nature. So for mankind, beauty is a developed sense. You have the sense already that your tastes refine. Okay, those are your senses. Does your sense of beauty refine? Does it develop?
So, with aesthetic beauty, you gave the example of, beautiful morning, trees, plants, birds, things like that. But then for aesthetic beauty, he would say maybe a symphony or something that's
I think so.
beautifully constructed, where you would need to develop your mind to be able to recognize that beauty is.
Where you would need to have judgment, develop judgment. Yeah. Actually, let me see if this will help us here on that question. No, we'll skip it. Okay. So, to the next. This is when I will need the you-know-what. The last musical example. The Es ist vollbracht. Okay, great. All right. So, we're going to listen to another work of Bach, not so coincidentally, but one of the more profound pieces of music that have ever been produced. And this is from the St. John's Passion. I imagine some people here have heard it, others may not. Bach wrote a series of these passions, depictions with a chorus. You have an orchestra, a chorus, a few soloists, taking on the texts of the New Testament's accounts of the life of Jesus Christ. So St. John's Passion is the Passion from John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. So it takes up much of the text and takes you through the life of Jesus Christ, although John starts later than some of the earlier ones. I think it might start when he's already captured. So in the Es ist vollbracht, the piece that we're going to listen to, we've come to the moment where Jesus has been captured. He's refused to capitulate. He's been denied by Peter thrice, and has come to the moment where he has gone willingly to his own crucifixion. And this piece comes up just after the soloist who's playing Bach says the words, Es ist vollbracht. It is fulfilled, or it is finished. These are the last words that Jesus says. And I'm going to read the text, and then we'll listen to it. All is fulfilled. O comfort for the ailing soul. The night of sorrow now measures out its last hour. The hero out of Judah conquers with might and concludes the battle. It is finished. I'll read through that again. I wanted to project it. All is fulfilled. O comfort for the ailing soul. The night of sorrow now measures out its last hour. The hero out of Judah conquers with might and concludes the battle. It is finished. So, we're going to listen to a well-done version of this in English. Friendly? Okay. This piece deals with the most profound concept mankind deals with, which is the question of, for what did Jesus give his life? More broadly, for what would you give your life? Mr. LaRouche often refers to this question as the question of not the meaning of your life, but the meaning of your having lived. What is the meaning of your having lived once you're gone? Now, the irony in this piece is that I would ask the question, was this piece tragic or was it triumphant? There was the shift part of the way through. The tempo picked up. You got a different sense at that point. That's the part where the text says Jesus, not Jesus, it says the guy from Judah, referring to Jesus, mightily conquered the foe. So during the unfolding of the piece, you're located in a place that's between tragedy and triumph. Because this question of what would you give your life for? It's not merely a question of, what would you step in front of a bus to save a child? Very simplistic. But for what would you be willing to suffer the slings, to suffer the potentially the dislike of your friends, your family, become an outcast, lose your material means? What personally would you be willing to do this for? In the case of Jesus in the St. John's Passion, he's doing it for the sake of all humanity. Would you do the same? So, but I think that the irony embedded in Bach's composition here, where it's not something that's sad, or it's not something that's fully sad. The beginning, the last iteration at the end, but then you have this middle section, which is very different. Do people want to hear the piece again? Yeah, let's play it again. So, yeah, let's go through the words again. Yeah, and what I'll do is I'll start it rolling and I'll just write the words up on the board while it's rolling. So we're going to listen to it again, and my question is this a tragedy or is it a triumph? Oh, through the words first. All right. So, and she uses slightly different words. I have not figured out yet exactly what they are, but the rough translation will give you the gestalt. All is fulfilled. Again, this comes right after Jesus says the last thing he's going to say. Es ist vollbracht. It is fulfilled. What is fulfilled? All is fulfilled. Oh, comfort for the ailing soul. The night of sorrow now measures out its last hour. The hero out of Judah conquers with might and concludes the battle. It is finished. So there's an irony. You're not going to be able to logically, deductively explain a feeling of both tragedy and triumph. But in art, you can experience that feeling, in classical art. Then, having experienced it here, you can go back into the rest of your life, the rest of your experiences, and identify that sense. Most people understand the world very one-dimensionally. Oh, something good is happening. Oh, something bad is happening. Oh, I feel bad right now. Oh, is this a good thing or a bad thing? You tell me. I had an organizing discussion yesterday where we were discussing, well, what is the nature of the strategic situation we're in? And this guy was sharp. He was able to respond to the idea that it was not, you're not going to give someone a simplistic, everything's going to be fine, we're winning this fight. But at the same time, we're not all doomed and losing this fight. So, developing the sense of this state, you have a new power to act on the world around you. So that's the material that I have to go through with the now stated conclusion that any political achievement, any success in the political mission that we have right now will coincide with a revival of classical culture. This is where you develop an insight into the nature of man, the highest qualities of the mind of man. In the popular culture, everything is fixed to the moment. What am I touching right now? What am I tasting right now? Who's my boyfriend, girlfriend, third wife, fourth wife right now? This idea put forward by Bach, I mean, you take a step back for a second, the idea goes back thousands of years. It actually goes back much further, the concept. The performer we're listening to, Marian Anderson. She was, the first woman, black woman, performing at the Lincoln Memorial, set up by Eleanor Roosevelt after the Daughters of the American Revolution didn't let her perform, in the civil rights period. But who doesn't have to grapple with this concept? Is it specific to the moment? No, it's a universal principle. So, classical culture is, this is the field where we're going to develop these ideas. And the response that we're getting at these conferences that we're having, the New York conference, the Washington conference, what Daniel went through of this conference in Germany, is that whether it's a logically thought through thought or an impulse, people are responding to this challenge to get to the higher nature of mankind.
What about jazz music? Is there any classical culture in that? I've
heard people claim there is. I don't think so. I think it's a degeneration from a classical culture, but then again, what you want to look towards is what's the image of man that this gets across to you, right? Jazz music tends to cohere with a feeling and very often not the most sublime. So I think William Moorfield and Robbie McFerrin and some others were able to uplift some of these songs to something worth listening to, and we could in a moment actually. Oh, internet's down. But I would, yeah, I think they uplifted some of these things in the way of the African American spiritual. You know, uplifted them to that quality of actually expressing something. But I wouldn't myself look towards Gershwin as for a sign of culture or higher thought. Well, I know William Moorfield and Robbie McFerrin. William Moorfield. I'd show you a video. Wait, do I have it? No, I don't. Anyway, they were two similar to Marian Anderson in that they were very famous singers breaking the bounds of the color lines in the civil rights period. So with these guys, you have a lot of firsts. First person at the Met, first this, first that. But later in life, both of them worked with Lynn and worked with the Schiller Institute on the question of the revival of classical culture, which they understood, as do we from a different vantage point, that the political solution and the revival of classical culture are inexorably intertwined, that they're one and the same. So both of them performed a lot at our conferences, spoke. You can find a lot of that on the internet, on the Schiller Institute website, also on YouTube.
I'll say something about those two interpretations of Bach.
Yeah.
Could you?
Oh. One of them was, well, yeah, I'll say something. One of them gave you a sense of intention, where you were being drawn towards something. The other one, people were going like this in the room for a good reason. It was very mechanical. Mihua was imitating a pianist named Glenn Gould.
And which one was that? First
The
one?
bad one.
Which is-
Unfortunately, in the first case, it was the first one, and in the second case, it was the second one. It was the one that I played the better version, then I played that one, and then I played the better version again. We can go back. We have a few minutes. We can go back and listen to them. But when I played a Glenn Gould clip in this classroom about 4 months ago, someone said they thought it was a MIDI file. Because he plays very as though his brain is disconnected and he's just playing the notes at the right time. Ding, 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 ding. Do we want to go back and listen to that again?
Well,
I got a yes.
In the first few that you played, the melody changes in different ways. It's like people having a discussion about something and trying to arrive at the same conclusion in different ways, bringing out different ideas.
That's interesting. I mean, these fugues are a dialogue of voices. That's not the idea we were going for today, but, so let's look at one of these. Let's look at, I think the first one was a more stark difference. This is from the beginning of the fugue. Almost there.
Beginning 10 measures. To give
The
you a
beginning 10 measures.
sense of it.
question Mihua asks after she plays that is, would this move you to go out and transform society? Let me play the other one. Oops. In this one, something was drawing you towards the future. There was an intention. Louder? Oh, me louder. Wow. Okay, good. In this one, there was something drawing you towards the end, towards the future that hadn't yet happened.